Hey there, welcome back to Midlife and Glowing. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Nicole. And since it's Halloween week, we thought it'd be fun to play with a little seasonal theme. But instead of ghost stories or haunted houses, we're talking about something way scarier for midlife women. The stories we tell ourselves.
Right, we all have them, those quiet, sneaky little narratives that creep in and make us question our worth, our bodies, our health, or our future. And if we don't catch them, they can feel scarier than any horror movie.
So today, we're pulling those stories out of the shadows. We'll talk about the most common fears and limiting beliefs that haunt midlife women, why they show up, and how to rewrite them into something supportive and empowering. Here's the thing. Your brain is wired for story. It's how we make sense of the world. But in midlife, when hormones shift, roles change, and our bodies feel different, the stories we tell ourselves can easily turn negative.
All right, so let's talk about why these stories even matter. Because you might be thinking, it's just something I tell myself. Does it really make a difference?
The answer is yes, big time. Neuroscience shows that when you tell yourself a story often enough, your brain processes it almost like a real experience. It wires it in as truth.
Right, which means if you're always saying, I'm too old or it's too late, your brain starts looking for evidence to back that up. And you end up reinforcing the very story that keeps you stuck.
Exactly. And it's not just mindset, it's physiology. There was a study in the Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal that found repetitive negative thinking actually raised cortisol levels and was linked to higher risk of cognitive decline. So those scary stories you tell yourself aren't harmless, they're literally stressing out your body.
That's huge, and it makes me think of something Brené Brown says. You are the stories you tell yourself. Our narratives shape our sense of identity and possibility.
And the flip side is true too. A 2019 study in health psychology found that women who believed aging meant decline had more physical symptoms and even did worse on memory tests compared to women who believed aging could mean growth.
Wow. So just the way you frame your experience of aging changes how you feel and function. That's so powerful.
Carol Dweck's research on growth versus fixed mindset nails this. If you tell yourself, I can't change or it's too late, you stop trying, you stop taking action, and you kind of live into that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And here's the good news. Your words can work for you too. There's research showing that positive affirmations actually lower stress biomarkers after something stressful. So the little things, gratitude, journaling, reframing your self-talk, they're not fluffy. They're tools that literally shift your biology.
Yes, this is why we wanted to do this episode, because we can rewrite the scary stories we tell ourselves. We are the authors of our own lives. We can change the narrative to be more positive and growth-oriented. The thoughts you think about anything, your health, wealth, worth, etc., aren't trivial. They create your reality. Buddha said, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. And Marcus Aurelius said, our life is what our thoughts make it. And there's a couple books I've read in this last year that really talk about this very idea, that our thoughts create our reality. And those are The Law of Attraction by Esther and Jerry Hicks and A Changed Mind by David Bayer. So if this idea is interesting to you, those are some books that you can check out. But the bottom line is that thoughts matter. So we got to stop putting these scary stories on repeat in our minds.
Let's start naming some of these thought patterns that might be sabotaging our growth. Because when you shine a light on them, they're not so scary anymore. I'm invisible now. Many women feel unseen in midlife, especially in a culture that glorifies youth.
It's too late to change. Whether it's your health, career, or relationships, that feeling of the best years are behind me is such a common one.
Yeah, I think we so often get stuck in that because you think, oh, I didn't learn this or do this when I was younger. I can't do it now. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, you're never too old to make changes or, try something new. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, we've talked about that woman that started lifting weights like in her 50s or later. I can't remember when.
It was even in her 70s, actually.
Yeah. So, that's an example. And sometimes you'll see too on the news, like someone that was in her 70s, 80s, whatever, finished college or did something like that. It's all a mindset. It's never too late to do something that you want to do, that you feel passionate about, that brings you joy. So that is definitely a scary story we got to wipe from the slate.
Yes, definitely. Another one, I don't recognize my body anymore. Hormonal shifts, weight changes, and aging skin can fuel a lot of negative self-talk.
Yeah, this is definitely a big one. And this is a tough one too, because, what we see is a lot of our identity. So when
Hmm.
you look in the mirror and you see something that, you don't identify with anymore, that's a tough place to be.
It is. And, it's all normal. Like, we're going through a big change right now.
Yeah.
And things with our body are going to go along with that change.
Hmm.
It's inevitable. And if you're lucky, you get to age.
Right. That's a really great reframe for that.
Hmm.
That scary story is that it's a privilege.
And I think that if you reframe it like that, and also as, wow, look at all that my body has done and is able to do, all that I'm capable of with this body, that can shift that mindset as well.
Yeah. I actually I don't go on social media very often, but I just happened to pop on there recently and I saw this video from a young man. I don't know how old he was. I'm going to guess maybe in his early 20s. He was in a wheelchair. I don't know what condition he had, but he had the most beautiful message. He was like, I know most people would look at me and think that I have a hard life, but I really have nothing to complain about. I have a great life. And he said something like, I think that God said, I'm going to give this life to Jamie because I know he can handle it. So he kind of took the approach of, God gave me this life for a reason. I'm
That's
meant for this life.
that's such a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah, it really was. I just was like,
Because
oh
I
my,
think so often you can feel really sorry for yourself in those situations. You're like, I have wrinkles, I've gained weight, I can't fit in my clothes, and you can feel sorry for yourself. But on the other hand, you're so capable
right.
and you're able to kind of shift that and make the life you choose to have. Some
Mm-hmm.
things you can't change. I mean, obviously, if you're in a wheelchair, that's likely something you're not able to change. But,
Right.
you can change the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
You are in charge of your thoughts.
Right. That just makes me think of Viktor Frankl said something along the lines of you know, when he was going through the most horrific thing you could imagine in the concentration camps, his, wife and family had just been killed. And he said that he kept peace because he realized that the only thing that he had control over was something that they couldn't take from him, which is his response, his perspective, his outlook. And so he chose to keep that one thing that he still had control over and no one would ever be able to take away as what helped him move forward and maintain, a positive attitude in a time when you would think like, how could
Right.
anyone? So I think that's powerful. Our thoughts matter. Absolutely. And we have the ability to choose.
To reframe them.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Okay. Another one. Everyone else is handling this better than me. Comparison likes to creep in, especially on social media. This is one reason I personally tend to avoid social media. I mean, every time I go on there, I often end up feeling, either like I'm not doing enough or I'm behind or something like that. Of course, that's not always the case. I just shared an example of somebody that was really inspiring that I found on social media. But, you know, comparing ourselves to others is going to end up making us feel less than,
Hmm.
and taking all the inspiration from people today, but it makes me think of Mel Robbins. She had said something about when I find myself feeling jealous or comparing myself to someone, I just reframe it into, oh, that's interesting. Like being interested in that feeling of jealousy or comparing to somebody else and seeing it as an opportunity, like, well, that must be important to me. That must be something I care about. And then looking at it as an opportunity, well, that person did it, which means it's possible for me too. So,
Oh, that's a
yeah,
great way to look at it.
I love her.
Oh, yeah, Mel's the best. Because this one, like, it's so easy to fall into,
It
like,
is.
and also it matters on who you surround yourself with too.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're surrounding yourself with people who always are liking to keep up with the Joneses. And then all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, who even am I? Like, I don't care about this stuff. Why do all of a sudden I care about this stuff?
Right.
So I have had that in my life along the way where I'm like, why am I all of a sudden caring about that? This is never anything that I cared about before. But then
Right.
you take a look around and you're like, okay, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for me to step back. This isn't working for me. This is not
Mm-hmm.
who I am. This is not, I don't care about, what gossip is going on with so-and-so. It's not
Yeah.
anything that I ever cared about before. Like, why all of a sudden am I getting sucked up in this trap? So,
Right.
you just also have to be careful with who you're surrounding yourself with,
Mm-hmm.
because that energy matters. We talk about energy, that energy matters. And, what is it like? What is that saying? You're only good as the people you
Oh,
surround yourself with or something like that.
the 5 people you most surround yourself with. Yeah.
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 So definitely be selective.
Yeah. Be intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. And then the last one, I should have it all figured out by now. That pressure to have the perfect balance of family, career, health, and happiness by midlife. I think it's so easy to, again, kind of getting back to the other one, you're looking at other people and think, oh, well, by this point in my life, I should have all of my life pulled together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything should be sorted. I should know what's, all the
Yeah.
things. But just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you need to have it all figured out.
Right.
Some people, a lot of people can make huge career changes in midlife
Yeah.
and start from the ground up.
Right. Yeah. We just mentioned Mel, and in her book, I think it was a 5-second rule, she mentions that, at the age of 41, she shared the story that she was like in debt. She didn't know where her life was going and like all of this. And now look at her. Like she is
Hmm.
such an inspiration to millions of people, has, New York Times bestsellers. And I was reading stories of people that had attended her. She just did a Let Them tour. And all of the people's stories were just so amazing. So she's a perfect example, like we put so much pressure on ourselves
Hmm.
to be perfect, to, you mentioned keeping up with the Joneses, to be at a certain place at a certain time.
Right.
And, we just have to take it as it comes. And yes, take action. Certainly that doesn't mean you could just expect it to all fall into place, but
It takes hard work.
it does. It does. And
You have to be willing to put in that work,
right.
like you can't expect it to just be given to you. Yeah. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to
Right.
take action, but,
Yeah.
you don't have to have it all figured out. When we started,
Mm-hmm.
we had no idea what we were doing. And
Right.
most days we still don't. But you know what? That's
Right.
okay.
That's right.
It's
But yeah, and here's the thing, those stories are not true. They're just thoughts. But when you repeat them enough, they feel like facts.
so let's talk about why these stories show up in midlife.
Yeah. So a few reasons. First, hormones. Lower estrogen, progesterone, and even testosterone all affect your brain chemistry, your confidence, and even how your nervous system responds to stress.
Then there's transition. Kids are leaving home, aging parents, career shifts. Midlife is packed with change, and change always brings uncertainty. It can be very scary.
Yeah. And don't forget cultural messaging, right? We've been told for decades that aging is decline, that youth equates beauty. It's no wonder those scary stories get stuck on repeat because we're hearing them everywhere over and over again.
So here's the fun part. If we can tell ourselves these scary stories, we can also tell ourselves supportive ones.
Yes, it's about catching the thought, questioning it, and then reframing it. For example, instead of I feel invisible now, try I'm free to be more authentic than ever.
Instead of it's too late to change, try I'm just getting started.
Instead of I don't recognize my body, try I'm learning to support my body in this new chapter.
And sometimes it's not about flipping it into a positive, it's about curiosity. Asking, is that thought really true? Or what would I tell a friend who said this?
Yeah. Research even shows that gratitude journaling, affirmations, or simply practicing self-compassion can literally rewire your brain to quiet negative self-talk. We say all the time that a lot of these things sound simple, too simple. but we keep hearing them because there's some truth to them.
Okay, so we've unpacked the scary stories, but what do we do with them? How do we stop the spiral?
The first step is awareness. You can't rewrite a story you don't even realize you're telling yourself. A simple tool is just to notice your self-talk, like catch yourself in the moment when you say, "I'll never figure this out," or "I'm falling apart."
Yes, almost like hitting pause. You could keep notes in your phone or a journal to shine some light on what your personal thought patterns are. Seeing them written out makes it so obvious and sometimes even a little funny how dramatic the story sounds in your head.
Another tool is reframing. When you notice the story, ask yourself, is this a fact or is it a fear? Then shift it to something more supportive. For example, instead of "I'm too old to start," you could reframe it as, "I have more wisdom and experience now, so starting today is smarter than starting 20 years ago."
I love that. And reframing doesn't mean pretending everything is sunshine and rainbows. It just means finding a version of the story that's true and helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Another tool is evidence collecting. If your story is "I'm not strong anymore," go find evidence to the contrary. Maybe you carried all the groceries in one trip, or you finished a workout you didn't think you could. Write those wins down. That way you're building proof against the negative story.
And that's huge. And sometimes for me, it's asking, would I ever say this to my best friend? If the answer is no, then why am I saying it to myself? That check-in can help soften your language.
That's so good. I love that. We definitely need to be talking to ourselves like we would be talking to a best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And journaling can be another powerful reset. Even just 5 minutes to brain dump the scary story, then consciously rewrite it into a supportive one. It's like editing your own script.
Yeah, and I've also found community makes a difference. Talking to other women and realizing, oh, I'm not the only one telling myself this scary story takes away so much of the shame.
Yes, because shame thrives in silence. And when you share, you often realize other women see you in a much more positive light than you see yourself. Borrow their perspective until you can believe it yourself.
So just to recap, notice the story, reframe it, collect evidence for a new one, check in with how you talk to a friend, journal, and lean on your community.
Exactly. The scary stories lose their power when you start shining a light on them. And actually, the book A Changed Mind highlights a very similar framework. It works.
So this Halloween, instead of focusing on ghosts and goblins, let's shine light on the stories that haunt us.
Because when you shift those inner narratives, you don't just feel better, you start living differently. You create more space for joy, confidence, and possibility.
And we'd love to hear from you. What's a scary story you've been telling yourself, and how are you ready to rewrite it?
Send us a DM on TikTok or YouTube at Midlife and Glowing. And if you haven't yet, grab our free Daily Glow Rituals guide. It's full of small, supportive practices you can layer into your day.
Thanks for joining us this week. We'll be back with another episode to help you glow through midlife. No tricks, just treats.
Happy Halloween!
Thanks for hanging out with us on Midlife and Glowing.
If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to us if you'd follow the show, leave us a review, or share it with a friend who's glowing through midlife right alongside you.
Let's make it our best era yet. We'll see you next time.